Guys, what's up? It's your main man here, double to that H man. What's up, what's up, what's up? So, again, this is, a little new segment here upon with the other many segments of the pattern. This focuses on great teams. So, going back into history and just looking at some of the teams in which I think were truly exceptional in the way that they were built, in the way that in which they were played, and in the way in which they played, and also their structure. Now, a lot of people always see me referring to the Inter Milan team of 2010, Inter Milan team of 2010, and this is what I use as my defense mechanism for your boy Jose Mourinho. So yes, and I do believe that was one of the truly great footballing teams in how it was built. And I think the thing about this is that you always have to tell a story of what's happening. So Mourinho, he had announced himself as a special one for Chelsea and so forth, and he delivered Chelsea that league title in his first season, which was huge based on just how he was proclaimed. So he was arrogant, he was characteristic, he had a huge ego, but people really liked what he was like. So after he had done what he did with Chelsea, I think there for 3 or 4 seasons or so, he then decided to let me now move on to the Serie A. Remember, back in the late millennium, early 2010s to 2009, 2010, especially 09, 010, 11, that kind of period, Serie A was still pretty much at its height, but it was slowly dwindling down. It definitely wasn't of the heights it was in the late 90s, early 2000s, but it was still somewhat there. So AC Milan and Inter Milan was somewhat saying something. And this was still the post-Calciopoli era where, Inter Milan pretty much took the bulk of the best players, especially from Juventus. So with Mourinho coming in after Mancini had come in and win all the series, I think the real aim was Mourinho continue to just dominate the Serie A. I truly do not believe that people thought that Inter Milan would ever win the Champions League, let alone the treble. The focus was, because I think for Italians, they pretty much like to really, win the bread and butter, and the intense rivalry between Inter Milan and Juventus. I think Inter fans were like, Mourinho, come in and do what Mancini is doing. I keep on winning these league titles. But I think in the back of Mourinho's mind, I think he really felt that I can do something here. I can truly do something truly special here. And I do believe that one of the key things he did was letting go of Ibrahimovic. Because I remember one game, I think it was against United in the previous season before the 09-010 season. And I think in that season, Ibrahimovic was playing. I think United won that. And I think I could just see where, this is a player who is superb domestically. For some reason, he just doesn't really do it in the big games. And this is what I've always held against Ibrahimovic. That fair enough, Sweden, I understand you cannot do that for a walk for Sweden. But based on the kind of teams you've been part of, Juventus, AC Milan, PSG, Barcelona, have you not been able to really ride in the Champions League? I've got to hold that against you. So I think Mourinho knew that he needed a different kind of striker. And so that's why I would pretty much want to start it. So I think you have to start with Milito. Milito was a guy who never really got his fair due. And I believe that in Milito, Mourinho saw his finisher. I think Mourinho thought that I just need a guy who can finish. Ibrahimovic was a far better player overall, i.e. how he can build up play, his ball control, his dribbling, and how he can bring guys into it. But I think Mourinho said, F that. I've got someone else who can do that. First off, I just need a guy who can finish. And I think in Milito, you saw a guy who was a far better, much more of a cold-blooded finisher than your boy Ibrahimovic. So then, where does the creativity come from? And that's where he looked and really specified and honed in on Wesley Sneijder. But the key thing was, they can't work without one another. Sneijder needed Milito, Milito needed Sneijder. They both needed one another because they were a very good one-two punch, the creator and the finisher. But I think also as well, something that Mourinho did, which I think perhaps his most controversial move, was Eto'o. Remember, at this point, Eto'o was one of the best strikers in the world, without a doubt. At Barcelona, he was one of the best strikers. Even when he moved to Inter Milan, he was still considered one of the out-and-out best strikers in the world. So what Mourinho did was controversial. And also, I almost thought, see, now it's coming back to me. This was the controversial swap deal between Inter Milan and Barcelona. Now, I do not know who fully engineered it, whether it was Guardiola or whether it was Mourinho, but this was a swap deal that worked in Mourinho's favor and not in Barcelona's favor. And even when it happened, I was like, Barcelona are going to let go of Eto'o, one of the most crazy strikers. But then when he now moved to Inter Milan, what surprised me was when Mourinho played him, because Mourinho now decided to play Eto'o out wide. I don't know that Eto'o did not like playing out wide, and Eto'o was like, wait a minute, I'm a striker, I've always played in the middle. But somehow, some way, it actually worked. And with Eto'o actually scoring that very crucial goal in the Champions League against PSG, that's ultimately led them to go into the next round. But I think, and this is what I always say to guys of what every Mourinho team needs. He needs a brutal defense. A brutal, tough defense. In my opinion, there are very few, obviously, there are many out there, but I will put, in that specific season, especially the 2009-2010 season, I will specifically put Samuel and Lucio at that time up against any central defensive partnership, against anybody. Because what they did at that time, how good they were, how impenetrable they were, was absolutely magnificent. And you obviously had Shivu, you had Zanetti, who obviously helped to really just form that really strong back four union. Actually, let me just check something very quickly. Sorry. Chivu, Christian Chivu, the Romanian, I think so. So he was there as well. And of course, you had Toldo, who was an absolutely... Toldo was there, but I think Julio Cesar was who he picked. And Julio Cesar at that time was money. So they had both Cesar and Toldo, two top. I think Cesar and Toldo at the time were perhaps the two best keepers at that time. So, but you also look at the midfield as well. Cambiaso, you also had Stankovic, and you also had Pandev as well. So what it was there was no room for flashiness. It was a very, very effective team. And the beauty about this team is just how it worked. As in, that's why I said this was Mourinho's greatest ever creation. And I think if ever there was a team that represented Mourinho's philosophy, was this Inter Milan team, which is that you're going to find it very hard to score against us. Extremely hard to score against us, because our midfield works very hard. Our defense is impenetrable, and they've got a very tough goalkeeper as well, and we're very physical. But also as well, when we want to score, we can score. And we don't need many passes to score, and we can score in a myriad of ways. We've got Eto'o out wide and what he can do. Pandeva out wide and what he can do. We've got Snyder's amazing playmaking ability. And we have, in my opinion, at that time, the best, most consistent, most precise finisher. How Milito wasn't in the Argentina squad is crazy. For the 2010 World Cup is crazy. So I just thought that's why I said this Inter Milan team, it's almost going to be very difficult to beat them. It will almost be very, very difficult to beat them, just how, the way in which they were constructed. Because again, it's like when people say, okay, the Mourinho needs to sort of change his philosophy. It's like, there are different philosophies, but you need a team to utilize that philosophy. The defensive philosophy of we will make sure that you don't score, and we will make sure that when you make a mistake, we will score, and we are very pragmatic in our approach. That approach can work, and that approach can win you trophies, but you need the right players. And that Inter Milan team that Mourinho had can't play attacking football. They can't play free-flowing football because Cambiaso, Stankovic, Pandev, Milito, they don't have the speed and the mobility to play attacking free-flowing football that Klopp or Guardiola wants. That's just not going to happen. But you look at that team, they were just very tough to beat. But that's all, man. You have to look at Samuel and Lucio. Those guys were beasts because they were physically strong. They knew how to tackle. They were very tough, very aggressive. So it was very hard for the defenders to really get past them. Very, very, very difficult. So I just think that the philosophy in which Mourinho had, I thought that it was a beautiful thing to see, because this showed you that there is a different way of approaching this game. And even if for me personally, you can't beat what the Brazil 1970 team be like. That's just amazing. Maybe we'll even talk about that great team as well. That's the way that they played football is crazy. But I think with this team, and I think you have to look at what Mourinho did. I think for Mourinho, you have to credit him for wanting more than what they wanted of him. Inter Milan did not hire Mourinho to win the Champions League. If he could win it, it would be fine. They didn't hire him to win the Champions League. I think for Mourinho, against all odds, I think he really, really, even more so than that. I've talked about the team, but something that I didn't really talk about now, what makes this a really, truly great team, was their mentality. I think that for Mourinho, one of his, because people talk about his defensive work, how organized his team are. I think the key thing that is a recurring theme in all of Mourinho's teams, but especially in this team, is the mentality and the psychology. When you look at just the psychology of Cambiaso, of Samuel, of Zanetti, and so forth, their match-winning ability and how Mourinho permeated that into the squad, because Mourinho was always a manager. I told you, Mourinho coming in changed how we viewed managers. Never before had we seen a manager as charismatic as Mourinho. There's never been one. There's never been one since. I don't think there'll ever be one in a lifetime that was as charismatic as him, where he literally made managers like box office. He's the first manager who could sell a video game and could be on sponsorship ads. But so I think Mourinho, he sort of infused his personality into this team. So yes, they were very well organized. Yes, they were very well put together. But on top of that, it was the mentality, the edge, the chip on the shoulder, the drive that Mourinho had that he put upon them. And again, I've said this many times, how Standard did not win the Ballon d'Or is crazy, because it's every time I think of a number 10, okay, what would I say is the quintessential number 10? I think of Snyder at this time. There are very few players who played that number 10 position, i.e., perfecting the through ball in that area, as well as your boy Wesley. So how he did win is great. But I think, that's just what has made this team great. Hard to break down, hard to score against, and they knew how to score, and they had different key players and a very structured, precise way in which to score in a very specific, pragmatic, economical way.